You believe things. Right now. Things you've never questioned. Things you accept as absolute truth. Things that feel so obvious, so self-evident, so fundamentally correct that the idea of doubting them seems absurd. And those beliefs, those unexamined certainties, they're destroying you. Slowly, invisibly, completely. Francis Bacon understood something that most people die never realizing. The beliefs you never question are not your foundation. They're your prison. They're the invisible walls that determine what you can see, what you can think, what you can achieve, what you can become. And the most dangerous part? You don't even know they're there. You think you're thinking freely. You think you're making independent decisions. You think you're seeing reality clearly. But you're not. You're seeing through a filter of unexamined beliefs that were installed in you by people who had their own agendas, their own limitations, their own unexamined beliefs. Bacon called these idols of the mind, mental traps, cognitive prisons, systematic errors in thinking that lead you to false conclusions while making you feel absolutely certain you're right. And he didn't just identify them as interesting philosophical concepts. He warned that they had real, measurable costs in your career, in your relationships, in your understanding of the world, in your ability to adapt and survive. In every domain of your life, blind beliefs extract a price. And most people pay that price their entire lives without ever realizing what's being taken from them. Let's break down exactly what blind beliefs cost you and how Francis Bacon's warning from 400 years ago is more relevant now than it's ever been. The cost of inherited beliefs. You didn't create most of your beliefs, you inherited them. From your parents, from your culture, from your religion, from your education system, from your social environment, from the first 20 years of exposure to people who were themselves operating on inherited beliefs they'd never questioned. And you absorbed all of it, not consciously, not by choice, but through the simple mechanism of repetition and authority. When you're young, you accept what authorities tell you because you have no framework for questioning. Your parents say something is true, you believe it. Your teachers say something is fact, you accept it. Your religious leaders say something is moral, you internalize it. Your culture says something is normal, you conform to it. This is inevitable, necessary even for basic socialization and functioning. But here's the trap Bacon identified. Most people never graduate from this inherited belief system. They reach adulthood, even old age, still operating on beliefs they absorbed as children, never questioning, never examining, never asking the most fundamental question, is this actually true, or is this just what I was told? The cost? You're living someone else's life, making decisions based on their values, their fears, their understanding of the world, which was itself inherited from people before them. You think you're being yourself, but you're actually being an echo, a copy of a copy of a copy, each generation slightly degrading the fidelity of whatever original insight might have existed at the source. Bacon watched this play out in science. Researchers would accept ancient authorities, Aristotle, Galen, without question. They would design experiments to confirm what they already believed rather than discover what was actually true. And this prevented genuine progress for centuries. The same dynamic plays out in your life. You accept beliefs about what career path is respectable, what relationships should look like, what success means, what happiness requires. And those beliefs, inherited and unexamined, determine the entire shape of your life without you ever consciously choosing them. The cost of tribal beliefs. Bacon identified what he called the idol of the marketplace, the beliefs you adopt simply because everyone around you believes them. The consensus views of your tribe, your social group, your professional circle, your political affiliation. And these tribal beliefs are particularly dangerous because they come with social reinforcement. Believe what the tribe believes, and you're rewarded with acceptance, belonging, status. Question those beliefs, and you risk exile. So you conform, not necessarily consciously, but through subtle social pressure, you align your stated beliefs with the beliefs of those around you. And over time, you stop noticing that you've done this. You start to think these tribal beliefs are your own independent conclusions rather than social conformity disguised as thought. The cost here is catastrophic. Because tribal beliefs are optimized for group cohesion, not truth. They're designed to keep the tribe unified, not to reflect reality accurately. So you end up believing things that are demonstrably false, provably harmful, obviously limiting, because everyone around you believes them, and contradicting them would threaten your social position. Think about how this plays out practically. You're in a corporate environment where everyone believes success requires sacrificing personal life for career advancement. This belief isn't examined. It's just the water everyone swims in. So you adopt it. You sacrifice relationships, health, personal development, because that's what successful people in your environment do. Years later, you realize the belief was false, that the people who seemed successful were actually miserable, that there were other paths. But by then, you've paid the cost. Time you can't recover, relationships you can't rebuild, health you can't restore. Or you're in a social circle where everyone believes relationships should look a certain way, be structured around certain rules, follow certain patterns. You've never questioned whether these patterns actually work or create happiness. You just absorb them as how things are done. So you structure your romantic life around unexamined tribal beliefs. And when your relationships fail or feel empty, you don't question the beliefs. You assume you're doing it wrong. You try harder to conform to the pattern. Meanwhile, the pattern itself is the problem. The tribal belief is the poison, but you can't see it because everyone around you is drinking the same poison and calling it medicine. Bacon's warning was clear. If you want truth, you have to be willing to stand outside the tribe, to question consensus, to risk social disapproval. Because the tribe will lie to you every single day and reward you for believing the lies. Only by developing the ability to think independently of tribal pressure can you escape this cost. The cost of comfortable beliefs. Here's where it gets darker. You don't just inherit beliefs passively. You actively maintain certain beliefs because they're comfortable, because they protect your ego, because they allow you to avoid difficult truths. Bacon called this the idol of the cave, the personal biases and preferences that distort your perception of reality. You believe things because believing them feels good, because they confirm you're a good person, because they suggest you're smarter than others, because they explain away your failures, because they justify your choices, because they make the world seem more controllable, more fair, more aligned with your interests than it actually is. The belief that hard work always pays off? Comfortable. It means if you're not successful, you just need to work harder. It gives you control. It makes the world feel just. But it's also often false. Plenty of people work incredibly hard and stay poor. Plenty of people work moderately and become wealthy. The actual determinants of success are far more complex and often unfair. But accepting that complexity, that unfairness, is uncomfortable. So you cling to the simple, comfortable belief. And the cost is that you never learn to navigate reality as it actually is. The belief that people get what they deserve? Comfortable. It means the world is fair. Good people are rewarded. Bad people are punished. Your suffering must be meaningful. Their success must be earned. But reality doesn't work this way. Good people suffer meaningless tragedies. Terrible people often prosper. The universe is largely indifferent to human concepts of justice. But accepting this is deeply uncomfortable. It means you're not as in control as you want to believe. So you maintain the comfortable belief and pay the cost of constantly being surprised, confused, and bitter when reality doesn't match your expectations. Bacon's insight was that comfortable beliefs are the hardest to abandon because giving them up requires accepting uncomfortable truths. That you're not as special as you thought. That the world isn't as fair as you hoped. That your previous decisions might have been based on false premises. That you've wasted time, energy, and opportunity pursuing goals based on beliefs that were never true. This is painful, so most people never do it. They pay the cost of living in delusion rather than face the temporary pain of disillusionment. The cost of convenient beliefs. Different from comfortable beliefs, convenient beliefs are the ones you maintain, because questioning them would require changing your behavior. And changing behavior is hard. So you keep believing things that justify staying exactly where you are. You believe you don't have time to learn new skills. Convenient. It means you don't have to do the uncomfortable work of growth. But it's probably false. You have time. You just prioritize other things. The belief lets you avoid admitting that to yourself. You believe you're not the type of person who can do X. Convenient. It means you don't have to try and risk failure. But types of people is largely a myth. Most capabilities can be developed. The belief protects you from effort and potential embarrassment. You believe the system is rigged, so there's no point in trying. Convenient. It explains your lack of success without requiring you to examine your own contributions to that lack. Systems are often unfair, but they're rarely completely deterministic. There's almost always some room for agency. The belief lets you surrender that agency while feeling like a victim of circumstances rather than someone who chose comfort over effort. Bacon saw this in natural philosophy. Scholars would believe that certain questions were unanswerable or certain phenomena were beyond human understanding. Convenient. It meant they didn't have to do the difficult work of investigation. They could declare certain domains off limits to inquiry and feel wise for recognizing natural limits that were actually just excuses for intellectual laziness. The cost of convenient beliefs is stagnation. You stay exactly where you are, year after year, because all your beliefs are structured to justify not changing. And you feel good about it. You feel realistic, practical, wise even. But you're actually just afraid. Afraid of effort. Afraid of failure. Afraid of discovering that you could have been more but chose comfort instead. So you build a belief system that tells you comfort was the right choice. And you pay the cost in unrealized potential. The cost of identity beliefs. This is perhaps the most insidious category. Beliefs that have become part of your identity, that define who you think you are. These beliefs are nearly impossible to question because questioning them feels like questioning your own existence. You believe you're an introvert, or an extrovert, or a creative person, or a logical person, or someone who's bad with money, or someone who's unlucky in love. These aren't just observations, they're identity statements. They define the character you're playing. And once they're part of your identity, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you believe you're bad with money, you don't learn financial skills. Why would you? It's not who you are. So you stay bad with money, which confirms the belief, which strengthens the identity, which prevents learning, which maintains the problem. The belief creates the reality it describes. If you believe you're not a math person, you avoid mathematical thinking. You don't develop quantitative skills. You make decisions based on intuition when data would serve you better. And every time you fail at something involving numbers, you say, "See, I'm not a math person." Never recognizing that you're not a math person because you believe you're not a math person and act accordingly. Bacon's warning about identity beliefs was that they're the hardest to abandon because abandoning them requires reconstructing your sense of self. You have to admit that who you thought you were might have been a story you told yourself based on limited data and selective interpretation. That you could be someone different. That your identity is more fluid and changeable than you've allowed yourself to believe. The cost of rigid identity beliefs is that you imprison yourself in a character that might not serve you. You limit your possibilities to match a story about yourself that you never consciously chose. And you resist growth because growth would require admitting the story was incomplete or false. So you stay the same, call it authenticity, and miss entire dimensions of what you could become. The cost of never testing your beliefs. Bacon's greatest contribution wasn't just identifying these categories of blind beliefs. It was insisting on a method for testing them, the scientific method. The idea that beliefs should be held provisionally and tested against reality, rather than defended as absolute truths. But most people never do this with their personal beliefs. They never test them. They just hold them. You believe something about what people want in relationships? Have you tested it? Observed it systematically? Gathered data? Or do you just believe it because one person told you or one experience convinced you? You believe something about how careers work. Have you studied multiple paths? Talked to people who succeeded in different ways? Or do you just believe what you were told or what matches your assumptions? The cost of never testing your beliefs is that you navigate life based on untested hypotheses. You're running experiments without collecting data, making decisions without feedback loops. And when things don't work out, You don't question the beliefs. You question your execution. You try harder to apply beliefs that might be fundamentally flawed. Bacon's method was revolutionary because it was humble. It assumed all beliefs might be wrong and insisted on testing them. Not to be cynical, but to discover truth. Because acting on false beliefs has consequences. If you believe the wrong thing about how diseases spread, people die. If you believe the wrong thing about human nature, your relationships fail. If you believe the wrong thing about what creates success, you waste your life pursuing the wrong goals. The cost of certainty. Here's the ultimate cost Bacon identified. The more certain you are about your beliefs, the more closed you are to new information. Certainty feels powerful, feels strong, feels confident, but it's actually a form of blindness. Because when you're certain, you stop looking for evidence that might contradict your belief. You filter out contradictory information. You rationalize away data that doesn't fit. You become less accurate in your understanding of reality, while feeling more confident that you understand. Bacon called this the greatest obstacle to knowledge. Not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. Not uncertainty, but false certainty. Because an uncertain person asks questions, seeks information, remains open to correction. But a certain person defends, dismisses, doubles down, and in doing so, becomes more and more disconnected from reality, while feeling more and more convinced they understand it. Think about areas where you're absolutely certain, where you know you're right, where you can't imagine being wrong. Those are your danger zones. Those are where you're most likely to be blind, most likely to be paying costs you don't even recognize. Because your certainty prevents you from seeing the evidence that you might be wrong. The cost of certainty is perpetual error. You stay wrong about important things because you're too sure you're right to notice the evidence that you're not. And the more life experience you accumulate, the more certain you often become, even as reality becomes more complex and your beliefs become more obsolete. You should be getting less certain as you age and learn more about how complex reality is. But most people get more certain, more rigid, more closed, because certainty is comfortable and uncertainty is exhausting. The path out. So what's the solution? How do you escape the costs of blind beliefs? Bacon's answer was systematic doubt, not cynicism, not nihilism, but methodical questioning of your own beliefs, especially the ones you're most certain about, especially the ones everyone around you shares, especially the ones that are most comfortable and convenient. The practice is this. Take a belief you hold, any belief, especially one that feels obviously true, and ask, what would I need to observe to conclude this belief is false? If you can't think of anything, that's not because the belief is certainly true. It's because you've made the belief unfalsifiable. You've structured it so that no evidence could ever contradict it. Which means it's not a belief about reality. It's a dogma, and dogmas, by definition, are blind. Then, actively look for evidence that contradicts your belief. Don't just notice evidence that supports it. Deliberately seek out smart people who believe the opposite and understand their reasoning, not to argue with them, to understand whether they might be seeing something you're missing. This is uncomfortable. Your ego will resist. Your tribe might punish you for even considering alternative views, but this is the cost of escaping blind beliefs. Temporary social discomfort and ego threat. Small prices compared to the cost of staying blind. Next, hold your beliefs provisionally. Instead of, I believe X, think based on current information, X seems likely. This small linguistic shift changes everything. You're no longer defending a position. You're updating probabilities based on evidence. When new information arrives, you can update without feeling like you're admitting you were wrong. You were just working with incomplete information before. Now you have more. So you adjust. This is rationality. This is what Bacon was advocating. Beliefs as tools to navigate reality rather than identities to defend. The cost of awakening. But here's the dark truth Bacon didn't emphasize enough. There's a cost to escaping blind beliefs too. When you start questioning everything, when you abandon comfortable illusions, when you see reality more clearly, you often become alienated from people who are still operating on unexamined beliefs. You can't have the same conversations. You can't share the same certainties. You see through things they take seriously. You question things they consider sacred. This creates loneliness. Because most people are not on this path. Most people are content with their inherited, tribal, comfortable, convenient, and identity beliefs. They don't want them questioned. They certainly don't want you questioning yours in ways that might implicitly question theirs. So when you start thinking independently, you often have to do it alone. Or find the small percentage of people who are also willing to think rather than just believe. Bacon experienced this. As he developed his scientific method and questioned accepted authorities, he was often isolated, criticized, misunderstood. People thought he was arrogant for questioning ancient wisdom, dangerous for promoting methods that undermined religious and philosophical certainties. He paid social costs for his intellectual independence. But he also believed, and history proved him right, that the cost of questioning was worth it. That a life lived based on tested beliefs, even uncomfortable and inconvenient ones, was superior to a life lived based on comfortable illusions. That truth, however harsh, was more valuable than comforting lies. That the temporary pain of disillusionment was worth the long-term benefit of seeing reality clearly. The ultimate choice. So you have a choice. You can continue operating on blind beliefs, the ones you inherited, the ones your tribe reinforces, the ones that feel comfortable, the ones that are convenient, the ones that define your identity. You can stay certain, stay comfortable, stay unquestioned, and pay the costs that come with that. Limited growth, predictable patterns, exploitable weaknesses, a life shaped by beliefs you never chose and never examined. Or you can do what Bacon advocated. Question everything. Test your beliefs. Hold them provisionally. Update based on evidence. Accept uncertainty. Tolerate discomfort. Risk social disapproval. And in doing so, gradually replace blind beliefs with something more valuable. Not perfect knowledge, because that doesn't exist, but tested understanding. Provisional models that have survived contact with reality. Beliefs you've actually chosen rather than just absorbed. This path is harder. It requires more cognitive effort, more courage, more tolerance for complexity and uncertainty. But it's also the only path to genuine intellectual freedom, the only way to escape the invisible prison of unexamined beliefs that most people live in their entire lives without ever recognizing the bars. Bacon's warning was urgent. The longer you wait to question your beliefs, the more entrenched they become, the more costs they extract, the harder they are to abandon. A belief you've held for 30 years without questioning has become part of your psychological structure. Changing it requires reconstructing yourself. A belief you question early is still flexible, still negotiable, still subject to evidence and reason. So the question is not whether your current beliefs have costs. They do. All beliefs have costs. The question is whether those costs are worth what the beliefs provide. And you can't answer that question without examining the beliefs, without testing them, without being willing to abandon them if they fail the test. Most people never do this work. They live their entire lives believing things they never chose, never questioned, never tested. They pay massive costs in the form of wasted time, failed relationships, missed opportunities, unrealized potential, and they never even know what they lost because they never see the alternatives. They never imagine what they could have thought, done, or become if they'd been willing to question the beliefs that shaped them. Francis Bacon's warning about blind beliefs is not comfortable. It's not convenient. It doesn't fit neatly into tribal narratives or identity stories. It requires work, courage, and independence that most people would rather avoid. But the cost of ignoring it, the cost of remaining blind, that's not optional. You're paying it right now. Every day, in ways you can't even see because the beliefs that exact the cost are the same beliefs that prevent you from seeing them. The only question is whether you're willing to look, whether you're ready to question, whether you have the courage to discover which of your certainties might be prisons and which might be foundations. Because until you're willing to examine your beliefs, you're not free. You're just convinced you are. And that conviction, that unquestioned certainty, that's the most expensive belief of all.